Sterling College convened 150 people for talking about David Fleming's legacy. And it was a very invigorating discussion because it brought together so many diverse people who were asking very similar questions. How do we make the transition to a post-capitalist economy? What is the culture like? How should we meet our needs without the destructive aspects of capitalism?
It's been great to have this gathering in Sterling College because the college itself is so much aligned with David's own sense of priorities of small communities grounded in the agrarian pattern of existence, and of course the fact that it's a school and having young people part of the conference that we've been having was great. Last night we had a panel, and great majority of the audience was young people.
And now for an explanatory word on the books and the work. Because there is one work, but there are two books. Lean Logic, A Dictionary for the Future and How to Survive It. And the second one, Surviving the Future. The complete work is Lean Logic, a 600-plus page dictionary of entries that take us meanderingly through Fleming's brilliant, idiosyncratic, and holistic mind. Surviving the Future is a narrative story from Lean Logic that was beautifully and artfully fashioned by Sean Chamberlain in order to create an easier, more accessible entree to the bigger work.
But what I want to do is I want to read an excerpt from Surviving the Future to share with you some of the wit and joy that David used so beautifully to write about, well, the end of capitalism and the collapse of the planet's climate, sort of light stuff. The straw man. Invent an argument which your opponent did not use and then launch a horrified attack on it. This is distraction at its most immediate, obvious, and intentional. Summarize the other side's case. Make sure your version of it is as ridiculous as possible. Demolish the summary. Claim victory.
His voice is so seductive and irresistible. He clearly was a conversationalist. He clearly was a raconteur. He clearly was a voracious reader. And he filters it all through his sensibility in a way that is poetic, elegant, but not in the least bit rarefied or abstract. He's down to earth and real, and understands embodied knowledge, the human condition.
David's work has taken me somewhere that I hadn't got on my own. With 20 years of thinking about these issues and climate change and poverty, he took me over a threshold, and the very important threshold that I think the world collectively is struggling with right now, which is the desperate desire to hold on to what is. We all have our critiques of this culture, but it is still our culture. And it's still our system. This capitalist economic global system is the system that we were born in, raised in, are comfortable with. It is an extraordinarily difficult cognitive feat to be able to get beyond the desire to hold that.
I was introduced to David Fleming thanks to Chelsea Green. I was introduced to it through the work of the transition movement, Rob Hopkins and the Transition Town Guide, and this sort of body of work that emerged at that time. And so I am incredibly grateful to Margot and to Sean Chamberlain, who in this labor of love took Lean Logic and made a book, what Sean would call the gateway drug. This is the idea, is you read this, and then you really want to actually look at this. It's kind of a brilliant way to get us engaged. And I've heard Sean and I've heard Rob Hopkins and others talk about what were the streams that led to the sort of initial thinking around the transition movement. One of them is Richard Heinberg. Richard and his thinking on the intersection of energy, peak oil, and the economy was one of the threads that founded the transition movement. Another stream was permaculture, and the permaculture tradition and the permaculture design of which many of you are involved in practicing. And the third thread was David Fleming. David Fleming's thinking about lean economy, post-transition culture, and the importance of building a resilient culture. And that those three pieces are what I get up and think about almost every day now.
A lot of people coming from different directions understand that we're approaching a unique, transformative, dangerous time in human history. But most people tend to see it just from their perspective, whether it's the environment and climate change, or maybe they have a more of a political view of the world, and they see that global politics is just getting crazy, or the economic system and piling up a massive amount of debt, and where's all this going to go? But David somehow managed to put it all together in a way that very few others have. And I think it was his grounding in economics and history, so that he was able to see society as a whole system rather than just a set of parts, because it is a system, and you can't extract politics in the final analysis from ecology, because without the ecological foundation, there is no human society.
For me, David has brought a framing and a language that I hadn't quite seen or heard or read before. I mean, he just really, it's funny because as I'm reading his works, I'm going, yeah, but I've actually never heard it in that way. And so he's been able to sort of take what was in my head and plenty of other people's heads, I'm sure, in a general way, or like a feeling way, and actually codified it and said, this is what we mean by this. It's like, yes, that is what we mean by that.
We had these fabulous sort of breakout moments today where people say, well, I really want to talk about how do I align my life living between these two worlds, the world as we know it and the world that's being born.
I think can't completely overshadow the reality of the fact that we're living in a time when, so many species are disappearing, and human culture.
How familiar do you feel with David's work? And if
So we want to all get sort of in the same
yes. Well, yeah, I'm going to say, if you feel completely familiar, I could have written it myself, go over this way, and if you're like, I've only just heard of this thing, I have no idea what it's about, you're at that wall, okay? So place yourself on the line. And why did you guys stand where you are?
One of the benefits I have in my role at Sterling is that one of my trustees is the publisher of Chelsea Green Books. And I get gifts of books often. And Margot never asked me whether I've read the brewing book or the permaculture book. But when Surviving the Future came, she kept pestering me with questions about whether I had read this particular book. And when I did, it transformed a lot of my thinking about the mission of the college and the purpose of the education.
David Fleming doesn't prescribe. This is not a blueprint. He is suggesting, he's orienting us, he's pointing us in the right direction, because he understands that our human agency, individually and collectively, is the essence of it all. That this is not the Ten Commandments or something that Moses brought down from the mountaintop. It's something that we have to fulfill ourselves.
David's work, even if lean logic is too much to bite off, that Surviving the Future is really necessary for anyone that is wanting to focus on the work of building, rebuilding, reimagining, and reminding us of community and what it means to be in community and what we've been for so long. I think, again, that's so much of what David's work is, just saying, This is about remembering. This is about reconnecting, about being relational again. This is not some brilliant new idea. It's synthesizing old ones in a new way because we have to usher in a new time. It's coming regardless. A new time is coming, and it's going to look a lot like a lot of old times, but we aren't back there. This is not romanticizing the past. This is trying to think about a future that we can romanticize a little bit, but actually is very functional and very real and makes a lot of sense. You're not reading it going, oh, that could never happen. You're going, wow, how can we make this happen?
You know, for the sake of economic growth, for the sake of globalization, we have become atomized individuals. We have become consumers rather than citizens. We have become individuals rather than members of communities. And this has taken an enormous toll on us, each and every one, as individuals.
The essence of David's work, I would say, is this. The things that you know matter most in your life are the things that matter most in life. Not the things that we're told about on the adverts or from Wall Street or even from politicians these days. You know what matters.
Jennifer and I and Novo at large made the decision to fund the Surviving the Future Symposium at Sterling College because we want to be a megaphone when we can be, meaning literally we're just the megaphone. We're the thing that allows the voice to get to the people. And if we can be the tool in between, we're going to try and do it.
I think David Fleming's work has kind of sharpened the truth of how important it is to address the culture, the cultural underpinnings required to sort of help us survive the future. And what I mean by that is it's not just sort of institution building. It's not just thinking about how do we create a new cooperative or a time trade circle. It's how do we do that in such a way that helps us create or reconnect with our essential nature of community, mutual aid, and interdependence.
We managed without a lot of language, and certainly without writing, and without a lot of things to work inside these social units that got us to here. I mean, we made it, right? We survived the past. And so the question is, how will we survive the future?
The goal is the culture shift required to sustain these new institutions. And the more we can build those mutual aid muscles, that new cultural sensibility, or recover the latent nature in each of us, the sooner we do that, the more prepared we'll be as we enter into the economic and ecological transition.